Level 1. The Tiro. You're 18. You don't choose the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian Guard chooses you. You are a legionary. Third year. Rhine Frontier. The winters here don't feel like winters anywhere else. They feel like punishment. The barbarians across the tree line don't fight in formations. They paint their faces. They scream in languages that sound like animals tearing meat. When they charge, they don't care if they die. They only care that they take a Roman with them. You fight them in the mud. You thrust your gladius upward, twisting the blade just under the ribcage. That's what the centurion drilled into your head 1,000 times. You feel the hot blood spill over your knuckles. You step over the body. You hold the line. You do this for 14 hours. When the sun goes down, you don't sleep. You dig trenches. You eat hard grain boiled in muddy water. You look at the dark sky and think about Rome. You've never seen it. You just know it's a place where men sleep in dry beds and bathe in warm water. Glory is just a word out here. Survival is the only truth. You haven't distinguished yourself with politics or family connections. You've distinguished yourself with something simpler. You don't break. 3 years of not breaking. That's what they noticed. A senior officer pulls you aside after a training exercise. 2 questions. Are you from Italy? Are you loyal to the emperor above all other things? Above your commanding officer? Above your family? Above your own survival? You answer yes to both. He nods once. Report to Rome in 30 days. You've never been to Rome. The city hits you like a physical thing. The noise, the smell, the scale of it. 1 million people compressed into streets that weren't built for half that number. You report to the Castra Praetoria. Stone walls, permanent barracks, a fortress inside a city that isn't supposed to have fortresses. They issue your equipment, armor heavier than the legions. A gladius sharper than anything you carried on the frontier. And then one more thing. Inside the city, you will not wear any of it. Inside Rome, you wear a toga. You carry your gladius hidden beneath civilian cloth. The guard is invisible in the city it protects. You stand in the barracks on your first night and listen to Rome moving outside the walls. Somewhere in this city, in a palace on the Palatine Hill, the emperor sleeps. And somewhere in these barracks, a man who used to stand where you're standing now is planning something that will change who does the sleeping and who does the dying. You don't know that yet. You will. Level 2. The miles. You're 20. First posting. The Palatine Hill. The Emperor's Palace. You stand at the outer gate in a toga with a gladius beneath it and watch Rome move past you like you don't exist. Senators in litters. Merchants with carts. Citizens who have no idea the unremarkable man near the column is carrying a weapon and has orders to use it without hesitation. The Emperor passes within arm's reach on the 3rd day. You don't react. That's the training. No reaction. No expression. You are furniture that breathes. Part of the architecture of power. But you see him clearly. Augustus. First citizen of Rome. Older than you expected, tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. He walks with the weight of a man who has been holding something enormous for a very long time and cannot put it down. He glances at you as he passes. The way you glance at a column. Taking inventory. Then, he's gone. On the 41st day, a man tries to enter the palace. Well-dressed. Documents. The accent of a senator's household. He presents his case calmly and reasonably. The particular confidence of a man who has never in his life been told no by someone of your social rank. You tell him no. He escalates, demands, uses a name, a senator, someone important, someone whose name is supposed to open doors. You have been trained for exactly this moment. The guard's greatest vulnerability is not armed men. It is a persuasive one. You don't move. He leaves. 2 days later, your centurion pulls you aside. The man with the documents was connected to a conspiracy now under investigation. Your refusal was noted, filed, added to a record, building a picture of someone who cannot be moved by pressure. You never find out what the conspiracy was. You never find out what happened to the man. That's the job. You hold the line, and you don't get to know what was on the other side of it. You go back to your post. You stand at the gate. You watch Rome move past like you don't exist. Level 3. The immunes. You're 23. They give you a secondary role. Intelligence work. You move through Rome in your civilian tog, and you listen. At markets. At baths. At gatherings where wine loosens opinions that are dangerous to hold out loud in the wrong company. You report what you hear. Names. Conversations. The senator who said something he shouldn't have about the succession. The merchant whose business connects him to men in provinces produces troubling correspondence. The philosopher whose lectures have been drawing larger crowds than philosophy usually warrants. You are 23 years old, and you are building files on men who are 3 times your age and 100 times your social rank. This is the moment you first understand what the Praetorian Guard actually is. Not a bodyguard unit. A bodyguard unit reacts. The Guard anticipates. It is embedded in the city, in the court, in the empire's nervous system. Its job is not just to stop threats. Its job is to know about threats before they become threats. To shape the information that reaches the emperor. To be, in some quiet and unacknowledged way, the thing that holds the whole structure together. The thing that can also, if it chooses, take the structure apart. You marry at 24. A woman named Livia, not the empress, a merchant's daughter from the Aventine district. Dark hair. Practical mind. The kind of woman who asks direct questions and waits for real answers. She asks you once what you actually do. You tell her you manage security for important buildings. She looks at you for a long moment. She knows it's not the whole truth. She accepts it anyway. That acceptance, the choosing not to push further, is the first price she pays for being with you. It will not be the last. You come home late. You leave before dawn. You cancel dinners without explanation. You sit at the table and say nothing for long stretches, because you are replaying a conversation from that afternoon, mapping its implications, trying to determine if what sounded like a complaint was sedition actually. Livia learns to read your silences. She learns which ones mean you're thinking and which ones mean you're somewhere she cannot follow. She never complains. That's almost worse. Power is not the man on the throne. Power is the information that reaches the man on the throne. And you are now part of the machinery that controls that information. You walk home one evening. Livia has left a lamp burning in the window so you can find your way back in the dark. You stand in the street for a moment looking at it. You go inside. Level 4. The Tesserarius. You're 29. You control the gates. Every person who wants to see the emperor or his inner circle must pass through your checkpoint. You control access. You control the flow of power. In Rome, that means you control everything. A merchant from Alexandria approaches you one morning. Grain contract. Palace magistrate. The waiting list is 6 months long. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't demand. He simply opens a small leather pouch on the stone table between you. 30 gold array. More money than your father earned in his entire life. He calls it a token of respect for the guard. You stare at it. The legionary who bled in the mud of the Rhine would have arrested this man without hesitation. But that boy died somewhere between the frontier and this marble corridor. You look at the senators walking past every day, men stealing millions from the treasury with a smile and a forged document. You ask yourself why you should be the only one playing by the rules in a city that has no rules. You slide the pouch into your cloak. You open the gate. The merchant walks through. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Over the next 2 years, the pouches become regular. The amounts grow. You tell yourself it is simply the way Rome works, that the corruption was here before you and will be here after you, and your refusal would change nothing except your own account. You are right about all of it. That is what makes it so easy. Livia asks once why you seem different. More comfortable. Less angry. You tell her Rome has been good to you. She looks at you the way she always looks at you, when she knows the half-truth is all she is going to get. She goes back to her sewing. You go back to counting gold. Level 5. The Evocatus. You're 34. 16 years of service. The guard offers you retirement. A cash payment. Land. A veteran status will carry weight for the rest of their life. You have earned it. You have stood at gates and walked corridors and filed reports and watched 3 men sit on the throne that Augustus built. One died of natural causes. One died of something that was officially natural causes. One was removed by the guard itself, a prefect, a tribune, and a decision made in a room you were not in. You watched all of it from the inside. You said nothing. They offer you retirement, and you say no. Not because you love the work, because you understand now that there are 2 kinds of men in Rome. The men who know how the city actually functions, who make the real decisions, who control the real information, who decide which emperors live long enough to become history. And the men who don't know. The men who go to the baths and discuss politics as though politics is what they think it is. You've spent 16 years becoming the first kind of man. You're not going back to being the second kind. The guard gives you privileges for staying, better quarters, a stipend above standard pay, access to conversations most men of your rank would never hear. You take all of it. You stay. Level 6. The Decurion. You're 37. First command. The Equate Singularis. The Emperor's cavalry escort. You ride with the Emperor now. Not beside him. Behind him, close enough to respond to anything. far enough to appear ceremonial. The horses are the finest in the empire. The men you command are the finest in the guard. Each of them was selected for the same quality. They don't break. You ride through Rome, through the provinces, through campaigns. The histories will record as the emperor's military genius, without mentioning the men who formed a wall of horses and flesh between that genius and anyone who wanted to end it. There is a man in your unit named Flavius, 15 years in the guard before you. Steady, skilled, utterly loyal to the institution, if not always to the man the institution is currently serving. One night, after a long ride, he says something quietly. Not quite a statement, not quite a question. The emperor is well. You look at him. You understand he is telling you something and also asking something. Whether you understand the difference between the emperor being well and the empire being well. Whether you have started, as the guard eventually starts every man who stays long enough, to think about those two things as separate concerns. You say nothing. Flavius nods. He goes to sleep. You lie awake for a long time, thinking about the difference between a man and the thing he represents, and what it means to be loyal to one versus the other. Level 7. The Centurion. You're 40. 80 men. You are responsible for their training, their discipline, their readiness, and in a crisis, their actions in the seconds before anyone has time to issue orders. A centurion in the guard doesn't wait for orders. A centurion reads the room and acts. The room you are reading now is complicated. The emperor has become erratic. Not publicly, like he is controlled, ceremonial, the image of Roman authority, but in the palace corridors, in the reports moving through the guard's internal channels, a picture is forming, decisions made without counsel, favorites elevated without merit. A growing suspicion of the men closest to Hat is making those men dangerous in a new way. A tribune pulls you aside, asks whether your sentry would respond to orders from the prefect directly if the situation required it, whether your men's loyalty to the guard as an institution is solid. You know what he is actually asking. You tell him your sentry is loyal to the guard. He nods. He walks away. 3 months pass. Nothing is said directly. Nothing is ever said directly. But the rotation schedules change. Certain sentries are positioned differently. Certain corridors thinned on a particular evening. Certain men were reassigned without explanation. You understand what you are watching being assembled. You say nothing. You make no record. You adjust your sentry's position and do not ask why the rotation changed. The night it happens, you are stationed 3 corridors away. You hear nothing. The guard is very good at what it does. What you hear is the silence afterward. The particular quality of silence that falls over a large building when something irreversible has occurred in one of its rooms. The silence of men who know and are deciding simultaneously, without coordination, to continue knowing without speaking. Then the orders come. Your sentry forms up. You march to the courtyard where the new emperor is already standing, already dressed, already composed, already emperor in everything except the formal proclamation that is about to happen. The guard cheers. You cheer. Your voice comes out of your throat and joins the other voices, and from the outside, it is indistinguishable from genuine celebration. That is what 22 years of training produce. A man who can do what is necessary with his body, while his mind is somewhere else entirely. Your mind is in the room 3 corridors away. You are thinking about the man who occupied that room. Not whether he deserved what happened. That calculation was made by people above your rank, and you have been in the guard long enough to know that deserving is not the relevant variable. You are thinking about the last time you saw him walk through the corridor outside your post. He nodded at you, the way Augustus nodded at you 20 years ago. Taking inventory, making sure the column was where it should be. He didn't know you had already agreed. Without agreeing, without being asked, without a single explicit word exchanged, to participate in the machinery of his removal. You cheer with the rest of them. The sound fills the courtyard and rises into the Roman night and means absolutely nothing about what anyone actually feels. You think about Flavius, about the question on the road 3 years ago, about the difference between a man and the thing he represents. You have your answer now. You're not sure it's an answer you can live with. You live with it anyway. Level 8. The Tribunus. You're 44. 500 men. An entire cohort. You sit in briefings with the prefect now. You receive information that does not leave the room, the full picture of what the guard is, what it has done, and what it is currently considering doing. The emperor is young. Elevated by the guard after the previous emperor's removal. Not cruel. Not erratic, simply weak in the particular way that makes powerful men around him dangerous. He trusts too easily. He delegates too completely. He has handed the machinery of empire to men who are running it for their own purposes and calling it service. The prefect is one of those men. You watch him operate with the precision you have to professionally admire, even as you understand what it means. Rivals removed, one at a time. Through accusation, through exile, through the kind of death that leaves no obvious evidence. He is making himself essential. Irreplaceable, making himself, in every practical sense, the emperor. Then Flavius appears in your office. He is 50 now, retired 3 years ago. He shouldn't be here. Retired men don't simply walk into tribune offices in the Castra Praetoria. That he is here means someone let him in. That someone let him in means this visit is known. That this visit is known means it is either sanctioned or it is a test. He sits down without being invited, old habit. The guard never fully leaves a man. He looks at you for a long moment, then he speaks quietly. Not quite a statement, not quite a question. The prefect serves himself. The emperor doesn't see it yet. Someone needs to make sure he sees it before it's too late. 15 years since the road, since the question A's about the emperor being well and the empire being well. He was asking it then too, just more carefully. You say nothing for a long time. Then, you ask him one question. Why come to you? He says because you cheered in the courtyard 6 years ago, and you were the only man in the formation whose face looked like it cost him something. He leaves. You sit in your office for a long time after. You file your cohort reports. You attend your briefings. You say nothing that cannot be said in a room full of the prefect's men. But you begin keeping a record. Not official. Personal. Hidden. Everything you observe that the prefect would not want observed. Dates. Names. Decisions. The pattern is building towards something that will not be good for anyone who cannot get out of its way. You don't know yet what you'll do with it. You know you're building it for a reason. Level 9. The Prefectus Praetorio. You're 52. You know everything. That is not a boast. It is a weight. You know which emperors died naturally and which didn't. You know which senators are on lists that don't officially exist. You know the financial arrangements connecting the Guard's senior leadership to men whose interests are not always Rome's interests. You know what the prefect was planning. The full shape of it. The emperor had been isolating. The heirs he had been eliminating. The Rome he intended to rule once the current arrangement became inconvenient, and you had Flavius's record. 4 years of observations, dates, names, decisions. The pattern lay out clearly enough that even the emperor, young, trusting, seeing what he wanted to see, would not be able to explain it away. You routed a copy to a man outside the prefect's circle, a man with direct access to the emperor. A man who owed you nothing and therefore could not be traced back to you through obligation. You did it knowing what it would cost. 3 days after the document reached its destination, Flavius was dead. Not officially. Officially, he died of a fever. He was old, retired. These things happen. The guard noted his passing with standard honors. His family received the appropriate payment. You attended the ceremony. You stood in the correct formation. You said the correct things. You did not let your face do anything that cost you anything, because you couldn't afford it. The document was in motion. The emperor was reading. The prefect didn't yet know where it came from. One wrong expression, everything Flavius helped you build would die with him. So you stood in formation. You said the correct things. The prefect was arrested within the month. Executed by men outside the guard, specifically not the guard, because even the emperor understood the symbolism. The empire continued. The guard survived, as it always survives. You were promoted. You thought about whether it was worth it. You decided that question was a luxury you could not afford. You kept working. Now you are the supreme commander. The only man in Rome, besides the emperor, allowed to carry a sword in his presence. 9 cohorts. The finest soldiers in the empire, positioned inside the city that was never supposed to have soldiers inside it. You are, in every practical sense, the second most powerful man in the world. The emperor trusts you. He should. You have spent 34 years becoming exactly the kind of man who should be trusted with this. But you have also spent 34 years watching what happens to men who trusted the wrong prefect. So you do something that surprises even you. You don't take more than you're given. You have access. The information. The loyalty of 9 cohorts who would follow a prefect's order over an emperor's if it came to that. You have watched every mechanism by which a prefect becomes the power behind the throne, and eventually the power instead of the throne. You use none of it. Not because you are incorruptible. You have done things in 34 years that would not survive the light of a public counting, but because you have watched what happens to Rome when the guard stops being the thing that protects it and becomes the thing that consumes it. The guard's real power, The power that has persisted across emperors and generations comes not from the emperors it has made, but from the stability it has maintained. The emperor dies in the 31st year of his reign. Old age, genuinely. You stand at the foot of his bed when it happens. This time, you do not have a successor quietly waiting. This time, you walk out onto the high stone ramparts of the Castra Praetoria and look down at what Rome has become. Below you, the wealthiest men in the empire have gathered. Senators, patricians, provincial governors. Desperate. They know that whoever controls the guard controls the world. They know you know it too. You raise your hand. The courtyard falls silent. You announce that the throne of Rome, dominion over millions of lives across 3 continents, will go to the man who pays the highest bounty to every soldier in the Praetorian Guard. The bidding begins. 20,000 sesterces per man. Then 30,000. Then 50,000. You watch the men who call themselves the honorable class of Rome, men whose families have governed for centuries, scream over each other, offering the wealth of entire nations for a crown soaked in blood. You watch them with something close to contempt, not because they are corrupt. You crossed that line yourself a long time ago on a stone table with 30 gold aurae and a merchant from Alexandria. You are not disgusted by the corruption. You are disgusted by the pretense, by the togas and the speeches and the Senate sessions and the centuries of carefully maintained theater, the performance of honor from men who always knew, somewhere beneath the performance, that it would come to this, that Rome was always for sale. That was the only question, the price. You point to the senator sweating in the front row. Highest bidder. You declare him the new emperor of Rome. Your men cheer. The gold arrives in wooden wagons. You walk off the ramparts. You walk through the Castra Praetoria. You walk home. The house is quiet in the way that houses become quiet, when they have been quiet long enough that the quiet is no longer absence but presence, its own permanent resident. Livia's lamp is not in the window. It hasn't been for 11 years. She didn't leave dramatically. She didn't issue ultimatums or make demands or ask the questions she had stopped expecting real answers to. She simply reached a morning where the half-truth was no longer enough to stay for. She packed what was hers. She left what wasn't. She placed the lamp, the one she used to leave burning, so you could find your way back in the dark, on the table by the door. You have moved it 3 times in 11 years. You have never taken it out of the house. You sit in the quiet for a while. Then you go back to work. Somewhere in the Castra Praetoria, a young legionary arrived this morning from the Rhine Frontier. He has never been to Rome. He stood at the gate and felt the city hit him like a physical thing. A senior officer will pull him aside this afternoon. Are you from Italy? Are you loyal to the emperor above all other things? He will say yes to both. He has no idea what he is saying yes to. He will.